Well, coronavirus has pretty much put the entire world into lockdown, and no doubt there's a lot of people who like to get out and about with the cameras and now can't, and wondering what are they going to do to fill the time. So in this video I've put together 3 photography projects that you can do at home that don't necessarily require a huge amount of equipment and will hopefully give you something to fill the time and let you practice and hone your skills a little bit. First of all is pet photography. Now there's only 2 essential components that you need to do this: a camera and a pet. Although optional extras that you could also use are lighting stands, diffusers for your lighting, although if Rusty's anything to go by, I've generally found having one of his toys is a good way to try and get his attention. And it also lets you do a mixture of trying to do portrait photos as well as action photos. If you have access to lighting equipment, it's probably preferable that you do use it because it allows for more dramatic looking shots, but if you don't have it, it's not the end of the world. You can try and experiment with different focal lengths, so you don't necessarily have to stick to long focal lengths. You can get closer and go slightly wider and incorporate more of the surrounding into the photos. And can be especially good practice if you have quite a lively pet, because you're never really sure what they're going to do next, so it keeps you on your toes. And this is something that you can do both indoors and outdoors. It might just be a question of space. And you can do this with literally any kind of pet. Doesn't need to be something obvious like a dog. Even a fish tank holds the potential of some rather nice, interesting photos. Next up, we'll look at one of my personal favourite types of shots to try and get, which is water balloon popping. Now for this you are going to need a tripod, a camera, obviously, a shutter release cable, a set of scissors, some balloons, even more obviously, some string, and I would recommend not flimsy stuff like this because it gives away far too easily. You want something pretty heavy duty that will hold the weight of a balloon full of water. Some sort of stick, such as a ruler, but literally any kind of longish stick, and a pin or a needle to pop the balloon with. Optional extras that you can use, a backdrop stand and crossbar, an additional stand and a boom pole, a plain backdrop, preferably black because it highlights the water better. You can use additional lighting such as speed lights. Off-camera flash is preferable, and obviously then you will need stands for them. So the first thing we'll need to do is prepare the vessel exploding apparatus, also known as sellotaping a pin to the stick. This is simply because you'll want the pin to pop the balloon, but you won't want to be holding the pin because then your hand's going to be in the photo. Next, you'll need to fill a balloon with water, although preferably do a batch of these because it's highly unlikely that you'll get the perfect shot first time. Now this whole thing I would recommend you do outdoors, given the fact that you're popping water balloons everywhere. You're probably not going to want to do it in a house. Now having found a location, you're going to need to sort out some way of hanging and suspending the balloon in mid-air. So for me, I just use the additional stand and boom bar, but if you don't have access to something like that, then you could try using something like the washing line. Now obviously for this type of shot, we're trying to freeze water in mid-air, so we're going to need a relatively high shutter speed. Now if you're doing this outdoors, you already have access to a fair amount of light, but if you're doing it on quite an overcast day, you might want to add some additional lighting to that. If you are using additional lighting, I would refrain from putting it around the front of the balloon near the camera. I'd suggest sticking more to the sides or the rear. Firstly, because it's going to be firing the light through the water, which is going to enhance it more, but it will also stop the light from lighting up the background and washing the water out. In terms of focal range, you'll probably want to be at least more than a 50mm focal range for the simple fact of keeping your camera away from the exploding water balloon. All you need to do for popping the balloon is have your pin stick in one hand, your shutter cable in another, and try and match your timing for when you hit the balloon and push the shutter button. more often than not, you'll probably find yourself with just a blob of water in the air, or you've missed it entirely. But if you get your timing just right, you might be able to get that little window of opportunity where the water's still holding the shape of a balloon and hasn't started to fall yet, but the balloon itself has already popped. Now, you might be thinking, well, these are useless so far, Dave, because I don't have any pets and I don't have a garden, or I have a phobia of balloons. Well, lastly, we'll look at product photography. And again, all you need for this is a camera and a product to shoot, which might be another camera. And optional extras for this are pretty much infinite, but the main ones that I would suggest are, again, additional lighting and some sort of reflective or textured surfaces to shoot on. Now, you can really take product shots pretty much anywhere. Indoors or outdoors. You can have just the product on its own, or you can put additional items in with it to try and enhance the shot, or you can even include people using the product. All I would suggest is try and keep the focus on the product itself, so make sure you don't have too much stuff that becomes distracting. And as with the pet photos, additional lighting in this case is preferable because it does allow you to create much more dramatic effects, or it gives you more flexibility with the effects that you can come up with. The good thing with product photos, however, is that as long as the product you're shooting doesn't move, you don't need flashes and speed lights. Continuous lighting will do, as long as the camera taking the photo remains static, so is on a tripod or a solid surface. You can take as long an exposure as you need to get the look that you want. So in this case, I'm using 3 continuous lights that happen to be 2 bowling RGB lights, both set in white anyway, and a Lume Cube light panel being the third. The product in this particular case is the Canon 60D. I have it laying flat on one sheet of Perspex, and then I have another sheet of Perspex propped up behind it so the background's not in the view. I have one of my light panels set up to the right of the product to light up the 60D badge. I have one set to the left of the product about 45 degrees, very low brightness, which is just putting those specks of light on the front of the lens. And I have the third one set up around the back of the product to try and add a bit of a rim light. You can experiment with products of different materials, such as glass bottles, for example, can be quite challenging to try and get used to. And if you have the ability of getting quite a close focus, you could also try and focus on particular details of a product rather than the product as a whole. So there you have it, 3 nice and easy little creative setups that you can try on your own just to help hone and master those photography skills whilst we're all not allowed outside anyway. Hopefully you found this interesting, guys, and who knows, maybe I will come up with some more of these in the future. But as always, guys, if you have any questions or queries, the comment box is down below. While you're down there, if you haven't already, please consider hitting the subscribe button, and also consider checking out my Patreon account and merch store as well. But thank you so much for stopping by, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.